and Mom and Dad can hardly wait.
Good morning, everyone. The Standing Committee on Interior will now come to order. We are here today for public hearings on Bill 40, an act to amend various statutes with respect to energy, the electrical sector, and public utilities. Are there any questions before we begin? See none, I will now call on the Honorable Stephen Lecce, Minister of Energy and Mines, to make his opening statement. Minister, you will have 20 minutes to make an opening statement, followed by 39 minutes of questions from the members of the committee. Minister Lecce, the floor is yours.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleagues, for being with us this morning. I want to thank the Deputy Minister, the ADMs who are with us today, all of whom play an important role in the implementation of securing affordable energy for generations. This bill, which is before the legislature, is really designed to support an expansion of energy system with a focus on limiting the reliance on foreign jurisdictions, on enabling more economic growth in the province by buying more Canadian, and by explicitly and intentionally making economic growth a priority within our energy ecosystem. Obviously, I think the problem we're trying to solve is how do we create a more competitive economy in a world disrupted by President Trump. And part of the mission of the province, and you see the same language of the federal government, that deals with building the strongest economy in the G7. We want to go much further than that. We want to create the competitive advantage to attract investment. And so we recognize the threats by the U.S., by other countries. The FAO has estimated that these tariffs could result in significant job losses. We're talking, upwards of 68,000. Very serious, sobering statistics. And I think we're all, across party lines, deeply distressed by this reality and determined to create advantage and support Canadian businesses and workers who are maybe displaced by or exposed by tariffs. The manufacturing sector is, of course, the greatest area of vulnerability. And so at the same time, we recognize the ISO is forecasting a continued surge in electricity demand over the next 25 years. Notwithstanding the economic headwinds, we still see net growth of demand. And so be it industrial demand growing 23 terawatt hours, 58% for context by 2035, largely driven by electric vehicles and other pressure points, where you see new business investing in the province. We have the recovery of 300,000 manufacturing jobs. The population has grown. The federal government obviously manages this, but households are expected in the province to grow by 15% by 2035, 1 million more homes, which accounts for, again, 9% of total demand. We're seeing a shift towards electrification of key industries, and this is a good thing. Electric vehicle adoption for expected, but it does significantly reduce economy-wide emissions. So we see this as a value add for Ontario, but it also represents the largest driver of increased electricity demand. Roughly 31% of new demand is driven on that basis. So look, in the face of rising tariffs, we are obviously as a government doubling down on nation-building projects, on Canadian projects that strengthen our economy and create thousands of jobs in the province. Last week, the Prime Minister released a second phase of nation-building projects. The first, of course, included the small modular reactor project that was well underway in Ontario. But the Crawford Nickel Mine alone will contribute $70 billion to GDP over the 4-year lifespan of that asset, $16 billion in government revenue, and likewise $16 billion in labor income over the 1,000 direct, 3,000 indirect jobs. My point, colleagues, is it's a case study that we can work together to advance the interests of Canada. The SMR project was a very important, I know, to all of us. The parliamentary assistant, Rudy Cazzetto, and I helped not just move this project forward, but secure export opportunities so that Ontario's supply chain benefits from the build-out. 18,000 jobs estimated for construction for the fleet of 4, 3,700 permanent jobs, $38 billion to the GDP of Canada over the next 65 years of the asset. I mean, we're talking significant investment, and of course supported now by the province and the feds. Obviously, the objective is to protect our supply chain and build it out. Bill 40 also, I think, very intentionally addresses one of the upcoming public policy challenges for government, which is the rise of data centers. And what we try to do in this bill is to prioritize megawatts that power our industries and really focus on the net benefit of Ontario. We want to ensure competitiveness and system reliability. And of course, we welcome data center entrance in the province. We see it as important to a variety of drivers of the economy. And we see that global demand for AI, for cloud computing, data processing, this all really is helping to increase pressure. It's taking, or rather, it makes the point to prioritize electricity for data centers that support the province's economic interests, including those that may create jobs, that assist in domestic data hosting. I'm talking about data sovereignty, which is important to us, and obviously broadly strengthen our position in the digital economy. Data centers are currently projected to account for 13% of new electricity demand, and right now 4% of total electricity demand by 2035. That's a significant pressure point that's rising each decade. Aligning with similar regulatory efforts in other jurisdictions, you look at the British Columbia or Texas, California, Belgium, Netherlands, I mean literally east and west, north and south, you can find case studies where they have brought forth some sort of regulation like this that gives government the authority to say yes when it's in our interest. The advancement and adoption of AI and cloud computing are resulting in the need for these new data centers, and these AI and cloud computing data centers tend to be larger, and they obviously tend to be energy intensive. Instead of only consuming 10 to 50 megawatts, these data centers tend to consume hundreds of megawatts, sometimes up to a gigawatt. As of July of 2025, the ISO has now been receiving connection requests of up to 750 megawatts on a single connection point, with very quick implementation timelines. So can you just put into scale what our transmitters, our system planners, our utilities, the challenge they're facing? The initiative is part of the broader Energy for Generations, our integrated energy plan. This is our 25-year roadmap, would really position us well in the country. It is a project or initiative that ends the siloization of government, the short-sighted planning, by bringing together electricity and natural gas and fuels into one cogent, coordinated, long-term plan for growth. And there's 4 pillars of this plan. Keeping energy costs low, ensuring self-reliance and resilience in the grid, reliability to make sure power is 24/7 accessible, and of course clean power to attract investment and reduce emissions. And our bottom line in Ontario is that we need to maintain an affordable and secure and reliable clean electricity system that can support new housing and new business and support economic expansion. Crucial to meeting domestic projected demand is ensuring that we have power for future generations. And it isn't to say we will not build large AI data centers, not the case at all. We will do so, we must do so strategically. But failing to properly manage these requests could have a negative impact on Ontario's electricity system. And many of us can look to the US and other jurisdictions where those regulations or public interest regs were not in place. And ratepayers are now, think of Virginia or other case studies where it's a bit of the Wild West, and families are disproportionately facing the burden for these large data centers. So we want to find a system that finds an element of balance and protection for families and residential ratepayers, among others. Today's legislation will develop a framework to evaluate electricity connection requests of data centers. It would also include any other prescribed industry as required, be it electric vehicle manufacturing. Under these proposed amendments, large-scale data centers will require government approval before they're able to connect. The application process could employ weighted criteria. Of course, as you know, the legislation explicitly requires or sets out reg-making authority based on consultation. So we welcome feedback on what should that criteria should look like as we build out this legislation. And it really will place values on projects that meet strategic priorities. These priorities would be developed in collaboration with all ministries, with any relevant agencies of government that attract investment, the energy sector. All stakeholders will have a say. For example, the ISO would provide relevant information concerning each request, including potential challenges in meeting connection requests or broader implications to system planning. It also will support the need to prioritize data centers that deliver measurable benefits to local communities in the province, and I've outlined some of those priorities there. But one that I want to profile that is important to us, and we're hearing similar language of the federal government, is data sovereignty, making sure the data is stored in the province. I think that's an important consideration to maximize value for Canada if they're going to use so much of our power. And as demand for AI and cloud computing and digital services increase, we need the right mechanism to support this growth, and that's really why we're here. So how we treat the power needed by data centers sets the precedent for larger loads to come across all industry. And to help offset and add more megawatts into the grid, in the short term, we launched the largest energy saving program in Canadian history, $10.9 billion, putting it back into people's pockets, into families and small, medium-sized enterprises' pockets. And the benefits of this and how we manage our electricity is really important, how we conserve electricity. This is a program that delivers a 2-to-1 savings for the ratepayer. And they are benefits that are benefits customers by enabling homes and businesses to reduce electricity and to save money. It's the ultimate win-win. That's roughly an estimated nominal $12 billion in expected ratepayer savings over 24 years and reduce peak demand by 3,000 megawatts by 2036 alone. That is like eliminating or removing 3 million homes from the grid of power saved. Energy efficiency is obviously critical in this respect. When you consider the options, the cleanest, it's the lowest cost resource, it offers customers tools they need to save money. This is something we're trying to do more of. And energy efficiency programs, and the ISO has said that the provincial energy demand is 15% lower today than it otherwise would be. So this is meaning it's making a difference. And I think part of this bill is ensuring that Ontario's electricity system can support future growth, future investment, based on those pressures, notwithstanding the government is creating tools and incentives to reduce energy demand. The reality is we are growing as a province. And so we need to support, yes, our workforce and make sure reliability of the grid is reinforced. And so part of this bill, perhaps one of the key anchors of the bill, is an initiative that will allow Canadian businesses to benefit from the build-out. That's why we're doubling down on Canadian innovation, on our supply chains, on prioritizing Canadian companies in every major procurement. When our trading partners turn inward, we are turning to each other, buying Canadian and building Canadian and keeping our economic benefits in this province and country. It's why we introduced Bill 40 in the first place. We didn't wait. We took initiative in the spring. Remember, this bill was first introduced in the spring at an important time in sort of geopolitics and trade tension. We wanted to signal to Canadians we will intentionally buy more within this province. And this bill enables Ontario utilities to buy Canadian, build a more secure energy system. For example, it allows rate-regulated entities such as electricity or gas utilities to track and recover potential costs due to these procurements when they're buying Canadian. The Ontario Energy Board, which is a mandate to protect consumers, will review these costs and continue to only approve those that are reasonable. So there's still a prudency factor. But the bottom line is the regs could be proposed as part of a broader initiative, a tariff response strategy to support our domestic supply chain. And I know all of you, we could point to businesses in literally all regions of members in this room, north and south, where businesses in the supply chain are benefiting, be it on transmission or generation or storage. All of our communities are benefiting from this, but we want to see more of it. And I will just say, we do a lot of good. We already buy a lot of Canadian in energy, but I think it is prudent in this moment to be a challenge function of government, of agencies, of private enterprises to do better in this new world order. To give context, 80 cents to the dollar for our SMR is going to Ontario businesses. $500 million already secured in supply chain benefits. 200 businesses are involved in the multi-billion-dollar project. At Bruce Power's life extension project, to their credit, 98% stays in this country. We're talking about a $13 billion project. 98% of that spend will stay in the country. That's 22,000 direct and indirect jobs and billions in economic activity. Now, Hydro One, of course, is a private company. Certainly the province has a large stake in the business, but I will just note their publicly disclosed procurement spend of a $2.9 billion that they expended last year. 93% supported made-in-Canada businesses. And it has a goal, it has exceeded its goal of directing 5% of sourceable spending to Indigenous-owned businesses. At OPG, this is something more germane to us in the government and ministry. It's effectively a Crown Corporation. 90% of their annual expenditure went to made-in-Ontario specific businesses, not just Canadian. So my point is we already do a lot, but I know we can do more. And that's the spirit of Bill 40 as a challenge function to all rate-regulated industries and to intentionally buy more Canadian. It also creates an opportunity with the Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade to think about long lead procurements. Obviously the government is contemplating the Pickering life extension, Bruce C, Wesleyville. How do we work backwards and think strategically of what are that delta, that small percentage of product that is not made in Ontario or Canada, often because it isn't, never has been. If we have massive purchase orders, and we're talking about the largest nuclear build-out on Earth, then I think it gives us the opportunity to work with manufacturers to domesticate investments if we can commit to large-scale procurement. And I think this creates a real opportunity for Ontario to sort of reverse engineer long leads and try to domesticate more business in the province. Another element of this bill that's important to me is the codification of economic growth within two statutes that are important. The legislation includes amendments to the Electricity Act and the Ontario Energy Board Act to make economic growth a formal objective of both the ISO and the OEB. And I think this really matters. I mean, currently that is not an explicit requirement or mandate of those energy agencies. And I think we all agree energy security is very much tied to economic security and the growth, there's a natural relationship between the two. And so we need to have both. Energy really is the driver of economic growth or the disabler, depending on if you have the megawatts or not. We have, and we're going to build more. But we see this as a natural relationship, and thus we need the ISO, the OEB, to have that consideration, that when they're making decisions, they're trying to ultimately create an incentive for business to invest their capital, to create jobs, build revenue for the state, but ultimately to support growth in the province. And we think this will help power new business, it will support jobs, it will attract the investment, it will enable electrification of key industries, and it will drive innovation across the sector. So we know with the threats we face, we believe the ISO, the OEB can play an even more crucial role in ensuring economic growth is taking hold across the province. And the ISO OEB would now be required, as proposed, to consider the role of economic growth in their electricity planning and the regulatory decisions. It's focused on enhancing the electricity transmission and distribution planning process. It ensures great expansion, can keep pace with demand, and it contributes to a key government priority on housing, on innovation, and on economic development. And so, greater alignment of the ISO planning process and OEB's policy and adjudicative proceedings we think is a good thing. And this approach would better equip the province's energy system to unlock investment and capital and jobs. We also speak about the importance of advancing hydrogen, which I know is something very important to the Associate Minister and many colleagues here. Energy for Generation recognizes low-carbon hydrogen as a strategic resource that can help meet growth, support industry, particularly heavy transportation, provide reliable energy storage. It's why, under the Associate Minister's leadership, he has launched a $30 million stream. He's doubled that stream. The Hydrogen Innovation Fund, again, sort of part and parcel of that broader economic growth vision, supported by our reforms in Bill 40. So the reality is, for the next 25 years, low-carbon hydrogen could have a more significant role in Ontario's energy sector. A modeling study commissioned by the province projects that hydrogen could make up 2 to 12% of final energy demand in Ontario by 2050. So we know that there could be up to 70,000 jobs in Canada, thousands in Ontario, in areas like production, infrastructure, storage, clean tech. It's an exciting time. This legislation includes amendments to the Electricity Act to include the promotion of hydrogen markets and the economy in Ontario within the purpose of the Act. It also enables the ISO to, among other things, support innovative projects that advance low-carbon hydrogen technology, which includes this new Hydrogen Innovation Fund. Chair, can I get a check on time, please? 2 more minutes. So, colleagues, the goal is really about securing power for generations, buying Canadian, leveraging the supply chain, thinking medium and long term and strategically about how we can attract more capital investment in manufacturing of Canadian components. The bill explicitly puts economic growth as a priority of government. I want to believe it's a priority of the legislature. All of us could accept the premise that we now need to move with a greater sense of speed, a bias of action, and a commitment to getting shovels in the ground on investments.
1 minute left.
And on projects that create jobs. Ultimately, this bill, I believe, is a common sense measure. It has been widely supported by the Electricity Distributors Association, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Association. We've got the CEO of the Ontario Centre for Innovation, the CEO of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce, the CEO of the Ontario Energy Association, the CEO of Communitech, the President and Vice Chancellor of the University of Waterloo, the Regional Chair of Waterloo. I mean, the list goes on. The Economic Development Council of Ontario. They are all on the record supporting provisions of this bill or all of the bill. And I think it speaks to a consensus that we need to do more and work together to stand up for Canadian workers and resources. And with that, Chair, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now we will go to the first round of questions and answers, and we will start with the government side. MPP Kizotto.
Thank you, Chair.
6.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here today. As we all know, that data centers will consume a lot of electricity, and being someone that has come out of the automotive industry here in Ontario, I know that with our government, we were able to attract $45 billion of automotive investment to Ontario when the previous government had lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs in this province. So our consumption of electricity is going to continue to grow and at rapid pace. How are we going to be able to manage this type of electricity consumption over the long term, and how will our nuclear expansion strengthen this as well?
I think it is... I think for many jurisdictions around us, Great Lakes states and provinces, the reality is most jurisdictions don't have power. That is the current state. I think if you have power, you have access, you have megawatts that are available. If you're a net exporter, you are in the minority. Ontario is has embraced that virtue. We have power. I appreciate it will become more scarce over time as industry and population and intensification builds, but the truth is we have a plan to secure power now, medium term, long term, and the Integrated Energy Plan lays out that 25-year roadmap. We very clearly come up with a cogent plan of integration, but of also securing generation. And I think the most important decision point before government is making sure we have a baseload power source to drive industry. It cannot be intermittent. We need to have baseload 24/7 reliable power. And how do we do that? Well, this is the government that has approved and authorized the refurbishment of our entire hydroelectric fleet of 5,000 megawatts. We've expanded hydro in the north, the first government in a decade to do that, supported and led by Indigenous nations. We have a plan to expand the largest public procurement in Canadian history, where where non-emitting resources can compete on the market, which is an important comparator or comparison of what was done in the past, where the former Liberals did not procure based on lowest cost options. They went with options 10 times above market. We still pay those 20-year contract liability costs today. We also, of course, are embracing nuclear power. Plan as proposed to extend the life of Pickering, to finish off, as we will next year, the Darlington nuclear refurbishment, contemplating Bruce C, adding almost 5,000 megawatts of net new power. We're going to have the largest generator on Earth. And of course, in Wesleyville, a bit more medium term, we're looking at the largest, up to 10,000 megawatts. Short-term action through the public procurement, short-term interventions through energy savings and programs that are helping to reduce thousands of megawatts from the grid. All of this, I think, should build confidence for families, for businesses, for foreign investors, that we have power. We're going to keep the grid clean. Our plan will get us to 99% non-emitting by 2050. But what we will not sacrifice is skyrocketing energy rates, which is a real challenge for families, which is why the energy efficiency program we launched this year is so important and so consequential and so significant, the largest of its kind in Canada, and it has a 2-to-1 return on investment for the ratepayer. So, and I think what I can say is more to come on that and how we could expand that program to give even more savings back to families.
Thank you. So it sounds like we are prepared for the future here in Ontario. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
MPP Insone.
Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here. Changes to legislation would allow the minister to exercise some control on the types of data centers that connect to the grid. Why does this benefit the province?
I just think in the absence of an authority of the government to say no, the current state is the Electricity Act has a non-discrimination clause which effectively means anyone, domestic or foreign, has a right to connect. And I just think, in what world does anyone have an automatic, innate right to access tens or hundreds of megawatts if there isn't a public interest value add for Canada or Ontario? So this is why we think we need to have some guardrail in place. And I'm not suggesting, we're going to go and consult on building out. What are those criteria? What is those regulatory, those guardrails? And I don't profess to have that answer. I want to listen to folks on the ground for perspective from utilities, security agencies, from ratepayers and families, Indigenous nations. Like, everyone will have an important say in building this out. But our bottom line is, our future state is to have the capacity to say yes when it's in our interest, build out what that criterion would look like according to net benefit to Canada. Not to suggest this is the inspiration for the bill, but there's other statutes that exist in Canada. Investment Canada Act has a net benefit clause. Like, there's the ability of Cabinet in that case to say yes or no, assuming it's in the national interest of Canada. While that isn't, we're not scoping our bill after theirs. It's sort of using it as a bit of a jurisdictional precedent that this exists in Canada. We want to apply to Ontario's data centers and protect our megawatts, protect our ratepayers, and really maximize benefits for our supply chain, and obviously when it comes to the storage of data.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. The government said you still have 35 seconds. Pass? Okay. Thank you.
Very generous.
We will move to the official opposition. MPP West, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just expanding on that, Minister, how will you in the future determine, what are the proper data centers?
So the legislation sets out the ability of Cabinet or government to create criteria and regulation. We're going to consult on that. I would welcome perspective from industry and experts on what that criteria looks like. This is sort of new for countries. We've never had this type of, we've had pressures on the grid, but the data center specifically is sort of a new phenomenon, sort of the last, let's say an emerging phenomena, a pressure point in the last 5 years, and will become more so over the next decade. So I don't have the answer today, but by design, I don't. We need to consult with subject matter experts, and then we'll set out the regulations. They'll be publicly available, and then we'll create a criteria that is defensible in the national interest.
Are there any concerns? I have concerns with Cabinet having that sort of control, where SDF has a couple of red flags on it. The Greenhouse, the Greenbelt has a couple of red flags on it. You go back to the Liberal Party, there's been some scandals that kind of led to their downfall. Is there any concern of having a political party, having the influence on it when people can make donations to the party or influence them? Not indicating you specifically, but in the future, at some point, there'll be another party in power, and you're setting precedent for the future as well, right? So what guardrails are in place for that?
Yeah, I think part of this will be seeking advice from the Independent Electricity Systems Operator. The ISO will play a fundamental role. They're really the system planner that can speak to if capacity exists in the system, transmission, generation. They'll play a fundamental role in giving advice to government. Look, at the end of the day, it is, if I use the Investment Canada example, it is Cabinet. It is elected officials who are publicly accountable to the people of Ontario to say if it's in the national interest or not. I'm not sure I think that accountability is important. We seek perspective, but ultimately we need to be able to defend these decisions. And if you're talking about 200 megawatts or 300 megawatts, like one SMR of energy, you make a fair point, and we would agree with it. There needs to be transparent criteria laid out. And we are going to consult, and I would welcome the opposition critics' perspective too as we build out the regs. We don't pretend to have all the answers, but I think we could agree on the public policy question we're trying to fix, which is how do we protect megawatts from risk or from the potential abuse of foreign actors who are not coming to Canada because they love our country and our values. They're coming because our climate is cool, beautiful for data center, lots of lakes and affordable power on a relative basis, among one of the most affordable in the Great Lake region. And because of our STEM graduates, our intellectual capacity and property, I mean, they're coming for all the right reasons,
Right.
but they're not necessarily coming to add value to the country. So my commitment to you, my commitment to the people of Ontario is we will build out that public interest element through regulation, through consultation, and I welcome the feedback of everyone here and beyond to make sure we get this right. Because there are some states who have not had either provinces or subnational governments who have not had this debate or discussion, and they're now paying the price. And what we need to commit to is not be like some of these states who don't have anyone, a system planner, a utility, a government saying yes or no. It's just a free-for-all. And I think we agree that's not a good thing and shouldn't be we should not become or allow a Wild West in the province.
One of the concerns I have, so I said I'm the Eastern rep for the National Council of State Governments, and some of the plenary conferences they've have discussions about large data centers and consumption of power and water to the point where agricultural areas are concerned they won't have enough water, to water their crops, where there's water limits on some of the towns, and I can scroll through maybe the second round of questions, show a couple of examples, but is that taken into consideration here? We have a lot of water in Ontario. My greater sub has 330 lakes. The Great Lakes is around, but there may be data centers in other areas. And is there anything in the bill in consideration in terms of what that means for people in terms of just drinking water or being able to water crops?
It could be informed in the consultation if there's concerns from either the scientific, environmental, or municipal perspectives or health. That would be taken into account for sure. I've not heard that concern, but it doesn't mean that we wouldn't be open to feedback on how to protect against that. I think what I would just say is any energy project, like under our government as a contrast with the former Liberals, is they imposed energy projects on municipalities without consent, without support. In fact, some of them were hostile against the imposition of energy projects. Our government put in, with the support of the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, a new requirement, a support resolution. So before I put a storage project or a nuclear SMR or a hydro or anything, or windmill, anything, the municipality, in this case the Sudbury Council, would have to pass a support resolution, which then enables the ISO to contemplate building out. So there is we've democratized putting local communities in the driver's seat before some politician or public servant at Queen's Park imposes our will. So that's some...
I think I take that with a grain of salt. I mean, your party has used the notwithstanding clause a couple of times.
Minute.
You did when you were the Minister of Education, as well as the Bill 5 has that whole section on the Dresden landfill, which the community of Dresden is really not in favor of. I appreciate what you're saying, but I'm just going to cross my fingers and hope it works because it hasn't always followed through. I'm going to get into hydrogen, but I think we'll wait for the next round because there won't be time to respond. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Now we move to the third party, MPP Sue.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for being here, Minister. I want to ask about a couple of things. One is the emphasis on economic growth consistent with the policies of the Government of Ontario, which is language taken directly from the bill. Wouldn't it be better to use per capita economic growth or something that's similar but a little bit different, productivity growth? I mean, if we're going to put this, I think, important policy, I'll grant that, in statute, why not be careful and get it as right as possible and emphasize really important things that are challenges for all of Canada, like productivity growth or economic growth, per capita economic growth? Would you be willing to support an amendment to change the language to include that concept, since we're we're carving it in stone here in law?
Certainly, the language under the proposed statute does not prohibit or does not negate the concept of enhancing productivity. That's the basis for the inclusion of the language. I think the spirit of what you're attempting to drive at is fulfilled in the language. But it is promising that we would agree that energy planners should have explicit requirement to consider economic growth as a criteria for their decision-making, which is not one today. What I mean by that is there may be industrial benefits of an energy project that will create a lot of jobs and add GDP gain to the country. that factoring right now is not really, in fact, legally it is not the consideration of the ISO. So I think having that broader...
I certainly agree with that. I certainly agree with that. Sorry, Minister, just because I'm under the clock here.
Okay. Keep going.
We do want to encourage things like innovation and competition. Those are the sort of things that contribute to the sorely needed productivity growth. And I'm just worried that if we only focus on economic growth consistent with the policies of the Government of Ontario, we may be accidentally picking winners and losers. We may be missing out on innovation. We may be stifling competition if the policies of the government of the day. Sometimes governments make the wrong choice when they pick winners and losers. That's why we have a free market, and we should be careful not to throw that away. And so, what I'm suggesting is that if we add productivity growth to the goal, that in the long term that will give better guidance for this government or a future government. Mm-hmm. Well, let me go on to my second question. I think I made my point. The second question is, we talked about data centers, and I think that right now, even without data centers, there's competition for connections. I mean, yes. I can see that even in my own community in Kingston. We have a shortage of power, and we have, because Kingston is a special place, it's got a lot of innovative people, and companies want to locate there because we've got researchers and we've got industry that's already there. It's a source of innovation. But they regularly get turned away because we can't guarantee the megawatts that they need to locate in Kingston. And I like the idea of telling the IESO that we don't want to throw away growth opportunities because we don't have the megawatts, the power on tap for companies that come. So what I'm worried about is the fact that there's really nothing specified in the legislation. It's just an open book. And I know you say you're going to consult, and I know you're going to consult. But shouldn't we have some guidelines in the legislation? For example, you mentioned data sovereignty, which I think is something that we should be striving for, because if we want to use artificial intelligence for healthcare purposes or for defense purposes, we've got to have data sovereignty. We've got to have supercomputing sovereignty. Right. But there's why not put the word sovereignty, data sovereignty, which it doesn't exist in the legislation right now. Mm-hmm. Why not put it in as one of possible criteria that could be used to set the regulations, to set the criteria for connection? Because anything you can do to put some guidelines around it and to give a little bit more certainty to businesses, that's good. That's good for business. It's good for productivity growth. It's good for encouraging investment. Mm-hmm. So why not? And I intend to introduce some amendments to just put in a few words. Mm-hmm. And data sovereignty could be one of them. Another one could be making sure that a company that wants to connect is likely to use that power. Sometimes you got to ask for that connection before you know if you got full financing and everything falls into place. That's the way business works. So I'm going to be putting forward some amendments.
1 minute.
To do that, and I would like to ask for your support to be open to those amendments that right now I feel like it's just too open. Mm-hmm. And we need to guide this government, we need to guide future governments without getting into the partisan reasons why we might want to do that. Would you be open to supporting such amendments?
Look, I've not seen them, and you've not given me the benefit of seeing them before today in real time. But what I can tell you is the spirit of the amendment, I think, which is to ensure data sovereignty is, for example, as one case study, is really an anchor of the reg or of the bill, of the policy. It is the stated position of the minister before a parliamentary committee today. We're not going to bring forth a regulation that is not going to include that as a priority. I've made that. In fact, that was one of the impetus for this was about data sovereignty. So while we may not amend the bill, you're going to achieve the same public policy outcome, then you have a guarantee from me to.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes our first round of questions. We will move to the second round, and we will start with the government side, MPP Dawi.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here. I know just a couple weeks ago, not a couple months ago, you came to visit my area. We visited Southwestern Manufacturing, which supplies for the nuclear industry and many, many others. And really, a lot of the work that they do is part of Ontario's role as a clean energy powerhouse, and we're able to provide domestic supply. And that's thanks to Ontario's clean electricity grid, probably the cleanest in the world. And we're powered by all kinds of technologies, nuclear, hydroelectric, and really emerging technologies. So the legislation proposed, I'm very excited to see it. It strengthens that leadership that we have in this province by expanding the mandates of our energy agencies to advance hydrogen and nuclear innovation. So my question to you, Minister, given the opportunities that we have, and I know even the OEMs in the automotive sector are looking for what's the next generation of powering our vehicles, how do the measures in the bill position Ontario as a North American leader in clean energy development and ensure that we have the diverse, reliable, and affordable power that we need to support our growing economy and our population?
I think first off, we believe in an all-the-above approach as a government. We do not discount any resource or commodity. I think the ISO has contemplated or is asked to look at public policy recommendations like the phase-out of natural gas, which would lead to reliability risks and obviously increased prices north of 60% for residential purposes. So, look, we're not going to take the position at a time when affordability is top of mind for all Ontarians to remove commodities that will increase prices. And while that wasn't specifically the question, I just wanted to affirm our focus on the lowest cost option through public procurement. The former government, as a matter of fact, did a lot of sole sourcing of product or resources 10 times above market. You know, you hear of the infamous 80 plus cents a kilowatt hour for renewables, and I think many ratepayers are deeply offended by this, and I think we accept we can never go back to that system, which is why we launched the largest public procurement in Canadian history. It's why we have initiated a series of energy efficiency expansions, and it's why, in part, when it comes to the clean economy, we've doubled the Hydrogen Innovation Fund, which the Associate Minister has led that work, realizing it is a low-carbon option, particularly for heavy vehicle transportation. And we see many businesses. I was present, when Walmart launched their fleet of hydrogen vehicles. Many businesses, including Canadian, are actually leading and innovating in this space. We see this as a huge economic driver, a bit of an untapped opportunity for Ontario, and there's a bit of a first mover's advantage. I mean, hydrogen is not new, but it's emerging, and we really want to be at the forefront of this. So to the Associate Minister's credit, he has been leading a great deal of work on building out a plan, doubling the fund, expanding the criteria, and really enhancing the return on investment for tax dollars that for the tax dollar that is invested in this program. So I'd agree with the premise. There's a ton of opportunity. There's a way to reduce emissions, grow the economy, and keep costs down, in this case for business. And I think that's a very sound thing. So the IEP, the Integrated Energy Plan, includes a specific provision or priority on hydrogen. And Bill 40 will just, again, going back to the principle of buying Canadian and keeping it affordable, this will be very much part of the build-out for the future.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
MPP Gallagher Murphy.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the Minister. Thank you for being here, as well as the entire team. Thank you very much. Now, around the world, we do know that data centers and AI are driving incredible economic transformation. Now, in the last round of questioning, you were talking about what's happening south of the border. And I believe the members opposite talked a bit about not only focusing on economic development, well, I'd like to think that we need to have a competitive edge. And I say that based on these comments. This past September, I attended the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Legislative Caucus meeting, where 9 of the U.S. states just south of our border are very much focused on bringing the data centers that are in the southern states up to the Great Lake U.S. states. And why? You nailed it on the head. It's because cooler temperatures closer to the Great Lakes.
Right.
So the U.S. is already thinking about this. So if we do not start thinking about our competitive edge, we could lose that. So, and I think we're very much in a position, we are well positioned to lead in this digital revolution. So that being said, Minister, how does this legislation empower Ontario to prioritize high-value data center projects and strengthen our economy to support our workforce?
Thank you. Well, very short, very brief. We've got about 6,500 megawatts prospective demand in data centers. Like that could be 30%. That represents 30%. So we obviously need to triage and create some criteria that benefits Ontario ratepayers, taxpayers, creates value in the communities that are built, and ensures that there's a retention of the sovereignty of the data sovereign to Canada. We want to make sure that we benefit intellectually from that data, and the R&D sectors and innovation sectors. So I think the fact that we have got ahead of this, opposed to waiting for some jurisdictions who didn't take action, weren't proactive, and are now realizing massive long-term costs to the people who pay the bills, is very prudent that we got ahead of it. But the truth is, there's 6,000 megawatts of prospective
Thank you, Minister.
demand.
The time is up. We move to the official opposition, MPP West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me go back to my questions. I was going to give you a couple of examples of the water consumption issues, but I think we'll run out of time. I'll print them up and give them to you just so you're aware. Earlier, one of my colleagues asked you about hydrogen, and you kept saying that there's a low carbon hydrogen. But are you talking about natural gas? Or did I mishear what you were saying?
No, I started with a bit of a soliloquy on why natural gas is an important option in our energy mix as an insurance policy, and then went to the question on hydrogen. So distinct, but in the same answer. Yeah.
Okay. So when we talk about hydrogen for Ontario,
right,
are we talking about extracting it from water or from natural gas, or what are the sources that we're interested in?
I would love to turn to the ADM, who could walk us through what we do and what we're about to do more of. Or the deputy may be well positioned. Maybe speak a bit about the HIF.
Thanks, Minister. Thank you. Hello, thank you for the question. I'm Kelly Brown. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister of the Distribution, Conservation and Innovation Policy Division at the Ministry of Energy and Mines. Thank you for your question. I think right now, as the Minister spoke to, we're sort of taking an all of the above approaches to our energy demand challenge here in Ontario. And part of that does entail low carbon hydrogen as a potential source of filling that energy gap into the future. So a couple of years ago, the government launched the low carbon hydrogen strategy. And that paved the way for us to undertake a number of initiatives to support the development of hydrogen, to support both the potential generation, so sources of energy generation, but also to use it in other industrial sources such as transportation and heavy industry. So it's really an above all approaches. There's a number of hydrogen companies through the Hydrogen Innovation Fund that was also launched back in 2023, and we've now just since expanded it. As the Minister just mentioned, back in a week ago or so, November 5th, we launched the second round of the Hydrogen Innovation Fund with two streams, one supporting the energy generation or supporting the electricity side of hydrogen generation, but also industry and transportation uses, things like hydrogen hubs, that sort of thing. So there's really an all of the above kind of approach to our hydrogen strategy as well, I would say, and through the support of $30 million through the Hydrogen Innovation Fund. And through that, you'll see companies applying for that fund to support energy production or hydrogen production and use in other sectors, like I said, industry and transportation.
So the reason I'm asking is during debate, the Associate Minister of Energy Intensive Projects talked about hydrogen coming from natural gas lines, how we went on a tour and saw this output, and I guess it's an offshoot or whatever else, but I'm wondering what is the criteria for a low-carbon hydrogen? Because when I hear of natural gas, there are a lot of people who are very concerned about the future of the planet and moving away from fossil fuels, and this feels like an opportunity to reinvigorate the connection with natural gas lines. And I understand that, there's a certain amount of the grid that requires natural gas. I live in Northern Ontario. Natural gas is needed for heating homes and stuff. But I don't know if most people would agree that hydrogen made from natural gas is low carbon. Am I missing something, or do I not understand the science?
I'm not sure what the Associate Minister said. If he was speaking to energy infrastructure, or the pipelines that will move the product. But I'd be happy to look at the transcript and provide clarity. But I think the bottom line is it is certainly a lower emission option relative to some of the existing product like diesel, et cetera, which is why it's been embraced by many big businesses who are looking to have a cleaner fuel source. So on a relative basis, it is better than what we've got. On the infrastructure to move the product, I would have to circle back with the member on that. I just don't know.
Yeah, it seemed to be like a product from the processing plant of natural gas, and they're capturing hydrogen from it. And through the whole debate, while I was drinking water, kept thinking, there's a lot of hydrogen right here in this glass that seems a lot cleaner than natural gas. And so maybe I just don't understand the science on it. But that was one of the questions I had, because it didn't quite make sense to me. And I think I'm in favor of looking at other energy sources, and hydrogen is a possibility. Mm-hmm. I just wasn't sure about how it worked.
We do have, if I could just add, we do have, as part of our Hydrogen Innovation Fund, there are a number of criteria, and one of those criteria is around low carbon. So I don't have it at my fingertips in terms of how we define it in the rated criteria that the ISO will use in considering a hydrogen project, but we're certainly happy to look up those rated criteria and get back to you.
1 minute.
Would you be able to send that to me just so I have an awareness if people are asking me questions? Because
it's available on the ISO's website. We can certainly send that to you. Yeah.
Okay.
Certainly, it's in their guidelines.
Can I get the clerk to make sure I get a copy of? Sometimes I don't receive things after I ask for it. There's less than a minute. I just I'll just grab one of the examples for the water. Phoenix, Arizona, data centers are using around 177 million gallons of water per day, raising alarms about the long-term sustainability of local water supplies. And there's a couple here, right? And it's one of the things that I think has to be on our radar. It isn't just the energy they need a ton of water for cooling. Mm-hmm. And then as well, there's a promise of job creation, but the overall job creation, typically the largest swell is when they build. There's minimal maintenance that has to be done in terms of janitorial and a couple of IT people, but we need to take that into consideration when we're looking at job creation if we're funding this as opposed to like a mine site where there's ongoing people working.
The time is up. Thank you very much, MPP West. We move to the third party, MPP Sue.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, why does the CEO of the Ontario Energy Board need the power to set internal procedural rules? Why does that have to be in statutes? Why is that needed for the public good? And is this a reaction to what happened inside the OAB that led to Bill 165 in the last Parliament, the bill which overrode an OEB decision?
I will turn to the officials about my perspective on the first question. On the second element, I think what I would just simply say is we want to ensure that there is an overwhelming focus on keeping energy rates low. While we're not here to discuss or debate that bill, if we didn't take action, it would have led to an increase of thousands of dollars per home. And I want to believe, and I know, I'm aware of the voting record of the parties opposite, but the effect of not supporting that bill, which would meant every single home would pay more, And I think that was an unacceptable reality for government at a time when people are struggling to pay the bills. But on the first question, I would like to turn to the Deputy Minister.
Susanna Laaksonen-Gregg, Deputy Minister at the Ministry of Energy and Mines. That change is not changing the OEB's governance structure in any way. As a matter of fact, it's about further enhancing the independence of the agency. So the change is really related to making sure that the CEO can deal with internal matters that are procedural, such as timing associated with the conduct of hearings, the timing for determinations made via delegated authority, or to require that certain information be considered in conducting a hearing. So these are more technical things, and there is a historic background to this because as the OEB modernization moved forward, this was a little bit of there was, as these new roles were created, there was a little bit unfinished work defining the roles between the chief operating officer, CEO, and so on. And so you could consider it more as a housekeeping that changing the structure.
Excuse me, I guess I'm a little bit surprised that this has to be in the statutes, and it isn't something that the board can set for themselves. Because the board appoints the CEO. Why couldn't the board also say, okay, CEO, we're appointing you, you make the internal procedure rules? Why does it have to be in statute?
Well, because how the statute was written, it created that whether you want to call it a gap or unclarity, and we just wanted to make sure that there is an absolute clarity related to that factor.
And so without that clarity, somebody else was making the internal procedural rules?
We wanted to simply, I would say that the board and the CEO have worked really well together. But
so why do you need more rules if they worked well together?
Well, I would say that I think that government wants to be precise and crisp, and we want our legislation to reflect.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to bring some amendments to make the legislation more precise and crisp. So that I'm glad to hear that. I want to switch just because I don't have that much time. And I want to bring something forward to the minister that I mentioned a little bit in debate at second reading, but I want to just say this in person because I think it's important. One of the things that we're doing is we're moving costs from energy bills to the government debt. As you know, your budget minister is mostly money that goes to reduce the cost of energy on the energy bill, but it goes into the government debt. But the thing I want to bring to your attention, Minister, is something in the long term. And what I'm worried about is that, every commodity goes through cycles. Every commodity goes through price cycles. And these days we're short of energy. But we hear announcements all over the world. Governments, big private companies are all getting into energy. Whether it's renewable energy or nuclear energy, everybody is throwing a lot of money into energy. What happens 10 to 20 years from now? After everybody and their brother and sister have built nuclear plants or renewable energy projects, I worry that 20 years from now we'll be on the other side of the commodity cycle. Given that we're subsidizing so much the cost of energy and putting it onto the public debt, what are you going to do to be careful that we don't get caught with our pants down at the other end of the energy commodity cycle, whenever that is?
Look, as a first principle, the reason why the province introduced
1 minute.
The Ontario Energy Rebate is because we inherited a system where energy costs were increasing by $1,000 a year. They were 300, almost 400% higher than when we started. That was a preposterous, offensive public policy legacy of the former government. I'm open to an alternative to a taxpayer rebate in the immediate term. Otherwise, energy rebates would skyrocket. Energy costs would skyrocket. So we've used the taxpayer rebate to draw it down to stabilize it for families and seniors. I appreciate intellectually the sustainability of it. I've said at estimates, I'd agree. Over time, it should come down. How we get there is through public procurements. We've recontracted the exact same project that the former Liberals did 30% below because we use public procurement as a competitive tension in the system. So we're going to get there. We're going to get to the promised land of not having to do this. I agree with the problem. I don't like it. But in the abstract, bills would skyrocket. We campaigned in 2018 on a subsidy program to stabilize bills. We've added the largest energy savings program in Canadian history. We've
Thank you,
used
Minister.
low-cost.
That concludes our morning hearing session. Thank you to the Minister, to the staff, and members of the committee. Now, this committee will take a recess until 3 p.m., where we are going to hear witnesses. So thank you very much for your patience and valuable input. We will see you at 3 o'clock.